Whole sports all plays. Yeah. Whole sports all plays. Whole sports all plays. 365, we making a plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety, topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. Sport all plays, like working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. Whole sports all plays.
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to ASAP Recap. I know you missed us last week, but we are back. Everyone's feeling a little bit better. At least we can say just a little bit better at the very least. Dustin, I know it's been a rough week. How you doing, my man?
Slowly getting better, but doing much better this week than last week.
Well, that's what we like to hear, always improving. And teams in the NBA always looking to improve, but that deadline has crossed. The NBA trade deadline over, and we had some big-time splashes. And we're going to go with the biggest fish in that entire pond. We'll start with James Harden. The big trade, James Harden and Paul Millsap are being sent to the Philadelphia 76ers for Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, and Andre Drummond, and 2 first-round picks to go along with that. Dustin, give me your initial thoughts on this trade, and who do you think won that trade?
I mean, the initial thoughts are you kind of saw it coming. Just because Ben Simmons has made it clear that he has no desire to play for Doc Rivers, so he wasn't going to suit up anyways, and James Harden has been visibly showing his frustration with the whole Kyrie Irving situation for the better half of the last month. So you kind of saw it coming. I don't think anyone saw this trade coming, where it was basically you swap 2 unhappy players for each other, and now all of a sudden they're going to be happy. Ben Simmons at this point, I don't know what he's going to be able to give to Brooklyn just because he hasn't played at all this season. I don't know what kind of basketball shape he's in. I don't know how long it's going to take him to get into basketball shape versus the Sixers might have just became the favorites in the Eastern Conference because you have one MVP candidate in Joel Embiid carrying him with another player that's won an MVP, and I think Philadelphia all of a sudden becomes the favorites in the Eastern Conference because there's not too many teams that are going to be able to stop those 2 guys on a given night.
Yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely there with you. I just don't know who or what Ben Simmons is at this point in time. If this is Ben Simmons, who at least I know is confident enough to drive the basketball or shoot the basketball, I feel fine about it because, again, you get the defensive thing you're looking for if you are the Brooklyn Nets, and Seth Curry can give you some of that offense. But if you talk about the way the Philadelphia 76ers got so much better because, again, we knew that Joel Embiid, he's a superstar in this league. The only issue about him is how long can he carry that load, right? That's the thing we don't know about him. And now you take some of that load off of his shoulders because he doesn't have to carry it because James Harden is going to be there. And I like your point, to your point about the fact that you got 2 kind of unhappy players in the same situation, and now you just flip teams. The one thing I'll say is that you have James Harden, who, remember, when he first came to Brooklyn, was very upset in Houston, and people thought he was overweight. He wasn't playing real well. And then once he gets to Brooklyn, he kind of just flipped the switch and starts giving you 25 and 10 every single night. And you said, what the heck? And he just shifted his entire style of play. This is something I can see happen much more quickly for Philadelphia than Brooklyn because I've seen it out of James Harden to when he gets in a situation that he initially likes, he can just turn the gear and flip it just like that.
Yeah, he did that. The thing that I said the other day is he wants to be somewhere where he's considered the guy. He was the 3rd option in Oklahoma City. He's the 3rd option in Brooklyn when Kyrie plays. But when he was in Houston, he was that guy. And now he's going to Philadelphia where Joel Embiid's going to be the guy. But James Harden is now kind of like your option 1B. And Embiid is option 1A. So now he kind of has that I'm the guy mentality again to go out there and do what he wants to do.
And to that as well, now he gets the basically sole obligation of bringing the ball up the floor, right? He's the guy, even though it's Joel Embiid's team, you get to control how the offense is kind of going to flow and run. So you still have that. And again, are we surprised that he wanted to go to Philly? No, you knew that the connection to Daryl Morey was there. This trade is going to be interesting. I mean, again, I think I'm with you there. This could make Philly the top contenders in the Eastern Conference. That's what you want out of any trade, especially during this time. If you're a contending team, you want to get better. And I definitely think the Philadelphia 76ers got a heck of a lot better.
Yep.
So that's not the only trade that happened. We got a lot to go into. CJ McCollum, the longtime Portland Trailblazer, he gets moved as well. he gets sent to the New Orleans Pelicans. The New Orleans Pelicans receive C.J. McCollum, Larry Nance Jr., and Tony Snell. In return, the Portland Trailblazers receive Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Thomas Storansky, Didi Luzada, and Josh Hart, as well as 2 future second-rounders and a New Orleans 2022 first-rounder. Dustin, when you see this trade, what do you think the rationale behind this trade is from both sides?
There's going to be a lot of kind of domino effects falling in Portland because Damian Lillard's going to demand a trade next season. He's pretty much made it clear that he doesn't want to leave. But after this, what choice does he have? You pretty much just gave him a NCAA roster and expect him to carry it next year when he comes back. So he's going to be the one that wants out next year, and that will help Portland because they'll be able to get picks for him. They'll be able to get a lot more towards their rebuild. He's just not going to stay with the rebuild. In terms of New Orleans, this is very intriguing for them because not only do you have C.J. McCollum, but you can pair him with Brandon Ingram, who's a very underrated small forward, and we've seen what he can do. And if Zion Williamson comes back healthy next year, that all of a sudden is a very good big three in New Orleans. It might not be like a championship contending big three, but it's one that can contend in the Western Conference and at least make things difficult for a lot of teams and make some noise in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. My initial thought was, okay, so Damian Lillard's done in Portland because there's no way you can realistically say, yeah, I'm going to come back to Portland based off of what this is. You know, like you go and like you said, you give him an NCAA roster. Okay, you know, what's he going to do with this? Portland's looking to move on into the future, and they're looking at Josh Hart, I think, who's the big commodity in this trade. They thought he was the guy that they should go after. And then with New Orleans, they are looking to assemble that big three, right? And they've been trying to find the guy that can do it. To me, it's looking like, okay, what can we do to entice Zion Williamson to stay, right? Because we know a lot of people in his circle have been saying, hey, Zion, get out of here. They sent him up to Portland to go do rehab. Different things have been happening with Zion, and we don't know if he's going to want to be back in New Orleans. So they're trying to keep him interested and try to make at least some splash. And again, C.J. McCollum coupled with Brandon Ingram could be really interesting because I think Brandon Ingram's a guy who doesn't get enough credit for what he's done since he got moved off of by the Los Angeles Lakers. And C.J. McCollum, another guy who I don't think gets enough credit for what he did in Portland. Yeah, it was Dame Lillard's team, but C.J. McCollum was a big part of their success. And I think that if you're looking at this, again, you're saying, Zion, look, now we got a guy in C.J. He's a proven veteran. And now we also have Brandon Ingram. He's the youngster that you can build around, and you're trying to get that big three. I think it's more of enticing Zion to stay is why they made this trade.
I agree. It's just, at this point, is Zion half in and half out. It just seems like ever since he got to New Orleans, he's been half there and half out. So is this just going to get him to kind of be 100% there? Or is it still going to be, well, I can't stay healthy, so I'm not going to give you 100%?
And then if you're able to trade Zion, you're not only left with another NCAA roster, kind of what you did when you had to trade Anthony Davis and get the pieces from Los Angeles. You got a bunch of developing pieces. Now you have C.J. McCollum, and to say he goes to New York and they have to give up an R.J. Barrett or something. Now at least you have that one veteran guy and a couple other pieces that can make stuff work. And that's, I think, the beauty of it for them was how can we make sure that if we have to trade Zion, if he doesn't want to be here, what can we do to say, okay, we can keep our team relatively competitive and not just go through the same cycle we did with AD. I thought C.J. McCollum and Larry Nance, allowed them to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if you're Zion, what do you ultimately think you're going to get out of this? You've played with Lonzo Ball before, and you've seen kind of how good your team can be when you have a good point guard distributor. C.J. McCollum might not be at the level of Zion Williamson, but he's a better offensive player. And now this is the first time in Zion's career that he's going to have two legitimate scoring options outside of himself.
Yeah. And again, this is just, I think, New Orleans' way of keeping him interested. And for Portland, I think we're both in agreement. They're looking to the future, and it's time for Damian Lillard to pony up. And I know Freddie Henderson, our man in the chat, he's looking for him to go and join the Los Angeles Lakers in the offseason. But a guy who moving from LA, but not the Lakers, it's more the Clippers, Serge Ibaka this was probably the most random and wild trade that I saw. You talk about 4 different teams, and let's break this down. The Milwaukee Bucks, they are getting Serge Ibaka and 2 second-round picks from Detroit. The Sacramento Kings get Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Jackson, and Trey Lyles. The Detroit Pistons get just Marvin Bagley. Am I correct on that one?
Yeah, just Bags.
Just Marvin Bagley. And then the Clippers, they receive Semi Ojeleye and Rodney Hood. A lot went down on that one, but I want to start with the Bucks. What are the Bucks getting with Serge Ibaka? And do you think this puts them back up top, the favorites in the Eastern Conference?
I don't think it puts them as the favorites because I still have Philadelphia there since they made that James Harden trade. But it's going to put them kind of in that conversation again, mainly because Serge Ibaka is going to give you what Brook Lopez gave you last year. He's not as good of a shooter as Brook Lopez from the outside, but he's very reliable, especially with the mid-range game. He's physical. He gives you some size. He can rebound. He can play defense. And he's a guy that can give Giannis breaks when Giannis gets in foul trouble because he can play either the 4 or the 5.
Yep.
So it is going to help the Bucks in the long run. And the biggest thing that people don't talk about, he's got a ton of playoff experience. He's been there, done this numerous times. He's been to, I think, 2 or 3 finals in his career. So this is not only adding a guy that's going to help you just with offense and defense, but you're adding a locker room guy that knows what it takes to win in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think they were really missing that Brook Lopez kind of guy during this season. You lose Brook Lopez and you lose PJ Tucker. It's 2 big losses defensively, right? And it's hard to replace those 2 guys. And I think Serge Ibaka does a great job filling in for them. So for me, Milwaukee doesn't go back to the favorites, but at least it gets them back into that. Okay, they can go out there, and if they have to go get Embiid, it's not just Giannis who has to guard him, and James just gets to run wild all over the court. You still got some more options. But from the other 3 teams, the Kings, Pistons, and the Clippers, who do you think got the best end of this 4-way stick?
Honestly, I think the Kings for a couple of reasons because they also got Sabonis in a previous trade with Indiana. So they they replaced Marvin Bagley with Sabonis. And Sabonis is a better all-around player because he can go to the perimeter and shoot 3. So that part of the deal was good. Dante DiVincenzo was brought in, I think, mainly to replace Tyrese Halliburton. He's not as athletically gifted. He's not as big, but he does a lot of the same things that Halliburton does. So that's kind of an even trade there. The only part of the deals that they've made that doesn't make sense is Justin Holiday. He's one of the few NBA players that's not vaccinated. And if you're not vaccinated, you can't play in California.
Yeah.
He's already told the Kings that he's not going to get vaccinated. So basically the Kings traded for a player that they're going to get for maybe 12 games because he's not going to be able to play any of the games in California.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I think the Kings did a really good job. I was really surprised when they let Halliburton walk and they moved off of him. I thought he was a guy that was going to be a cornerstone for their franchise. But to get Dante, and now you give some more depth to this backcourt that's going to feature Davion Mitchell and De'Aaron Fox. Those 2 guys probably going to start, and then you can bring in DiVincenzo off the bench, or you can bring him in for experience purposes. It just gives you that kind of ability just to morph your team a little bit. And Josh Jackson, I like that kid a lot. I liked what I saw anytime I watch him on the court. I think there's something there. I don't think he's going to give you this superstar potential, but he's definitely someone who's going to consistently contribute to your side. And if you can keep stacking pieces together, I know Sacramento's been a bad team for a very long time, but if you can continue to stack pieces, you're just hoping one day one of these things click. There's a superstar that comes or emerges from one of these guys and can hit. But like you said, I think the Kings definitely got this one. I do want to talk about the Clippers because I just feel like they're making a lot of random moves. Almost like I don't understand really what Semi Ojeleye or Rodney Hood really bring to the Clippers team this year without Kawhi Leonard, who let's just face it, they're not going to do much. But I just don't see what these 2 are going to really do to boost this Clippers team.
And I think that's why they're actually making the moves that they are.
Okay.
You're not going to have Kawhi for the whole season, so you could essentially say that this season is a wash for them at this point.
Mm-hmm.
They know they have the talent to make the playoffs, whether it's in the play-in or whether it's top 6. But at the same time, without Kawhi, they also know that they're really not going to get too far. So what's the point of trying to compete when you can't? Well, I mean, obviously they want to compete, but what's the point of really trying to go all in at this point with some of the pieces that you have? trade some of the pieces, bring in a guy like Rodney Hood and Ojale, because Rodney Hood is a decent offensive player. Ojale's had flashes, but he's nothing special. But if you can make the playoffs with what you have right now, you can kind of use the season as a mulligan. Basically saying we did what we did without Kawhi. Now we're getting Kawhi back and healthy next year. Now let's kind of focus on what we need to fix and then build toward a deeper playoff run next year.
Yeah, it feels kind of like they're falling into that same trap of when Kawhi first got there, when they had this roster that was unbelievably talented. Like they had a lot of pieces, and then you had Kawhi, and you felt, man, this team's gonna win it. How do you not win it? And again, I feel like even if you take it as a mulligan, I think the big thing is how does Kawhi fit with these pieces? Because I don't know how he's gonna fit with pieces because he seems to not fit with a lot of guys. You saw them blow up this roster that was incredibly deep and really good, just waiting for a superstar that could take him over the top, and he couldn't work with those guys. So to me, I just think the Clippers are trying to just dig themselves out of the hole, and it doesn't seem like they found a way to get out of it. And it's just, again, they're just going to keep digging and digging and digging until eventually I think Kawhi Leonard probably leaves the Clippers.
I think it's more so who do the Clippers want, because Paul George and Kawhi play the same position. They're both small forwards. They're both going to be on the floor at the same time when healthy, which means somebody's going to be playing out of position, whether it's the power forward position or the shooting guard, which neither one of them is good enough to handle a shooting guard position.
Right.
So when Leonard comes back healthy, I think it's more of who do the Clippers want more versus if Kawhi wants to leave. I don't see Kawhi leaving because this is really the team that he wanted to go to because he chose them over the Lakers. He chose them over anybody else that he could have went to. Versus the Clippers traded to get Paul George. And that alone, I kind of think they're more willing to kind of live and die with Kawhi because Kawhi picked them versus they went out and got Paul George. No. So I think next year will kind of be the key to where the Clippers find themselves, where the Clippers see themselves, and who do they want to build around? Do they want to build around Kawhi or do they want to build around George?
Yeah, it's a murky situation in there. The Pistons got Marvin Bagley. They're establishing another young piece for Detroit. You got Cade Cunningham, and you say, all right, let's go stacking Marvin Bagley. I think that's really the whole personnel. Say, all right, let's get the kind of Kobe Shaq kind of deal where you got the young guard with the young center. We'll see how that works out for Detroit. I don't have any faith in Detroit until Detroit shows me something. I'm just going to be in my lifetime. I haven't seen them do anything. The last time they won an NBA championship, I believe I was like 3 years old. So. I truly haven't seen them do anything, and that's not a knock on them. But I thought Marvin Bagley would be on our team. I thought he'd get traded to a team that was going to be a contender, and I think it's just disappointing for me, a guy who watched him play at Duke, to see him now be kind of diminished, go from Sacramento and be diminished to Detroit.
Right.
I mean, it's a rough cycle. You go from Duke and you're the main man, and now Sacramento to Detroit. Not a pretty cycle. Another guy I thought would get traded to maybe a contender, Domantas Sabonis. I think we were all talking about him potentially being a guy the Chicago Bulls look at. Well, like you mentioned earlier, the Sacramento Kings go and get him, Jeremy Lamb, Justin Holiday, and a 2023 second round pick. And the Pacers get Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield, and Tristan Thompson. So, Dustin, who do you think wins this trade given all the information you have now?
In the short term, Sacramento wins it because you know what you're getting out of Jeremy Lamb and you know what you're getting out of Sabonis. But in terms of the long term, I think the Pacers actually won it just because Halliburton's going to be a heck of a player.
Yeah,
he's going to be an all-star for years to come, and he's one of those Swiss Army knife type of players that can play multiple positions. We've seen what Buddy Hield can do. There's a reason why the Lakers wanted him this offseason because he gives the team good three-point shooting. He gives the team ability to put up 15, 20 points a game. And Tristan Thompson, say what you want about him, he might not be the most athletically gifted offensive player, but he's a great defender. Yeah. He knows what it takes to win in the playoffs, and he's a great veteran leader. And that's exactly what the Pacers need at this point because they're a young team. They're now on the verge of going into like that full-blown rebuild mode. So having veteran pieces to kind of guide these young players is critical, and that's why I think the Pacers are going to end up winning the trade in the long run.
I'm completely with you on this one. I was so shocked when the Kings moved off of Halliburton because, to me, quite honestly, I've seen more out of Halliburton than I've seen out of a De'Aaron Fox, to be fair. I know I like De'Aaron Fox. I think he's going to be good in the league. But Halliburton, I think, has just shown me – and it's a Swiss Army knife, I think, about him that really sticks out because, again, he can He can play on ball, off ball. He can go play to the 3. If you want to play really small, you can push him to 4. Not really, but you can move him around. I just thought he was someone that the Kings would not be willing to move off of. Like you said, Buddy Hield, another really good young 3-point shooter, a little bit inconsistent at times, but when he's on, that he could win you games. And that's why the Lakers, we're trying to go after him. And like you said, Tristan Thompson gives you that veteran experience. And for a Pacers team that wasn't going to compete this year, we know that getting rid of Sabonis made a lot of sense, moving off of him, because you're paying him. You're going to have to pay him some big time money. And to move off of him, get a little bit cheaper, move off of Justin Holiday, a Jeremy Lamb, guys who aren't making huge money but still are a significant amount of your cap, it makes sense to go in a younger direction. And again, you get a Halliburton, you get Buddy Hield, you've basically got your backcourt for the next 5 to 7, maybe 10 years with those two sitting there. And that's a great start to have for Indiana. Again, you're not winning this year. You're 13th right now in the Eastern Conference. You're behind Boston, which is unbelievable. I don't know how Boston is 7th. I can't do this. But Indiana, I think in the long run wins this trade. The Kings, like you said, exactly what you're getting out of Domantas Sabonis, out of Jeremy Lamb. You get basically nothing out of Justin Holiday. When he's on the floor, he's a great player, but he's not going to be on the floor. And then the 2023 second round pick, I have no idea what that's going to be if they will even use that pick. So in the short run, sure, the Kings probably see a record jump by a couple of games. But I'm on your boat here. The Pacers, to me, absolutely swept this trade because, again, you got your backcourt for the next 5 to 10 years with Halliburton and Buddy Hield.
Yeah.
Again, a lot went down on this NBA trade deadline. And a guy that the Mavericks thought was going to be a cornerstone of their franchise is having to be moved off of. Kristaps Porzingis, he gets dealt to the Washington Wizards along with a second-round pick in exchange for Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. Now, I really like the Porzingis trade to Dallas. I thought that was going to work. I just was so sold on it. And to his credit, when he was on the floor, it kind of worked, but he just could never consistently be on the floor for Dallas. What is your reaction to this move, Dustin?
I don't know what Washington was doing. I'm still trying to figure out what. I understood why the Mavericks wanted to move on, just because I think they're starting to see that Luka and Kristaps really don't mesh well together. Yeah. There's times that they do, but it's not consistent enough. But what is Washington doing on this trade? I mean, they're not a great basketball team, and no one's going to say they are, but they're still playing for the play-in at this point. Yeah. So they're still playing well enough to make the playoffs with what they have. And now they lost Bradley Beal for the rest of the year. So why would you give up Spencer Dinwiddie, who is probably your most consistent scoring option outside of Bradley Beal at this point, to bring in a guy like Kristaps, who is on the bench injured more than he's on the court healthy?
Yeah.
I mean, if he can stay healthy, I would love to see Bradley Beal play with Kristaps. I would love to see what they can do as kind of that inside-out combination where you have the 7-footer on the inside, you have Bradley Beal doing what he does. I just don't think we're going to see it because I think Kristaps will be gone or Beal will be traded before we get to see that. That's why I think this was more of Washington doing Dallas a favor and just kind of taking the money on at this point. But if they make this work and somehow like improve and get in out of the play-in, which I don't think they will, but if they can somehow make this work and improve their seeding, who knows what we'll see next year in Washington. Beal may want to stay, Kristaps may come back, and then you might see the Kristaps that everyone thought they would see when the Knicks drafted him 7 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, look, Kristaps Porzingis, you if you were to draw up maybe an impossible matchup, you might draw up Kristaps Porzingis. He's about 7'3", can shoot from the perimeter, and then can play down low as well. Yeah, that's like the modern stretch 4 in the NBA. That's the kind of guy you have, and he can, if you play small in quotations, now he's at your center. You got a 7'3" center who can go and shoot the 3 ball. So when on paper, it feels, this is a guy that should fit really anywhere. In the modern NBA, if you're a center or a power forward who can be physical and get outside and shoot the ball, you should find a really good niche in the NBA, at least in today's game. And he just hasn't found it, and it's more of injury to me. I think just his lack of ability on the court. You talk about when he's on the court this season, he's averaging 19.2 points a game and 7.7 rebounds. So it's not like he's not playing, but he hasn't played in like 2 months, or at least like it hasn't played in 2 months. And again, Luka and him never found that consistency. As much as Luka's fun to listen to and they made have cracked some jokes, and they just never found any consistency. And when I saw it, I said, Washington's giving up Spencer Dinwiddie. Like, this is, again, not a bad player. This is a kid who can play. Like, we've seen him play in different spots, and if you surround him with enough pieces, like if you put him on a team where he doesn't have to be the number one guy, we've seen him be able to consistently put up good numbers. So you give up him for a guy that you're banking on doesn't get hurt anymore. And he has an injury history. It just doesn't make sense. And again, it's not like you got a boatload of stuff to go along with it. You got him and you got a second round pick. And again, I don't know what the second round pick is going to be. So at least for this year, like you said, in the play-in, all you have is Kristaps Porzingis to replace Spencer Dinwiddie, who is your most consistent scorer outside of Bradley Beal, and Bradley Beal just gets hurt. So now you're starting from zero.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And Davis Bertans, of course, gets thrown into that mix as well. But now, Dustin, I want to talk about your team because I do want to ask your opinion on this. The Chicago Bulls didn't make any big splashes or any big moves in the trade deadline. I know we were talking about, early on Sabonis or Bagley to bring in another power forward to kind of fill the role of Vucevic. What did you make of the Bulls not making any moves? Is there a player that you wish they would have gotten? Just give me your whole breakdown of this.
I mean, they tried to get Jakob Poeltl from San Antonio, and I know they gave the Spurs an offer. Spurs rejected it, so it kind of got to the point where I think the Bulls focused too much on Poeltl and didn't really search the rest of the market for somebody else, and then it got too close to the deadline where they weren't able to put a package together to get somebody. I do think the Bulls are still going to make a move, but it's obviously got to come off of the waiver wire at this point in the buyout market. Goran Dragic, to me, is the one to keep an eye on because I don't see him staying. Where did he get traded to? Was it Toronto?
Yes, Toronto.
I don't think Toronto keeps him, and I think they buy out his contract. And with Lonzo Ball being out another 6 weeks with that knee injury, I could easily see the Bulls trying to get Dragic in as kind of that backup point guard, the veteran presence to give them that option off the bench, especially come the playoffs, which would be a nice get. Thaddeus Young, too. I mean, I don't know if Toronto's going to keep Thaddeus Young around or not, but Thaddeus Young was a great player with the Bulls the last couple of years, and Chicago loved him, and he was the one that they had to trade away to get DeMar DeRozan in that sign-and-trade deal. So if you're able to bring Thaddeus Young back, he gives you a lot of what you need. But at this point, I do think the Bulls make some sort of a move. It's just going to have to come off of the waiver market, and Dragic and Thaddeus Young are the two that I think make the most sense. But I have a feeling there's going to be a lot more names added to that buyout market in the next couple of days where it's going to help a lot of teams that didn't make those moves.
So, correction, Goran Dragic is on the Spurs now. He was in Toronto earlier on the season, but he's in San Antonio at the moment. Look, I was surprised when the Bulls didn't make a trade. And like you said, I think they were just so focused on one guy. They threw all their chips into that piece. And when they didn't get him, they just didn't have enough time to really go and try to make moves for guys like Marvin Bagley or Sabonis, who I thought would have really solidified that number 4. The buyout market's always interesting because, again, the guys who are projected to get bought out, but there's no assurance. It just really feels kind of like a crapshoot in and of itself. And the Lakers are also in that same situation. The Lakers, they did not want to move off of Russell Westbrook. They are focused on the buyout market. They didn't make any trades. And I do want to ask you, the report is that the Houston Rockets did offer a trade to the Los Angeles Lakers. Mm-hmm. They said, give us Russ and a first, and we will give you John Wall. Now, if you are the Lakers general manager, because you're a stat guy, you're the brains, would you have made that trade?
Yes, but they couldn't because they don't have a first-round pick. They don't have a first-round pick for a couple of years, I don't think.
2027.
So that kind of, hey, yeah, if you want to wait 5 years for a first-round pick, sure, we'll make that deal. But I don't even know why Houston even proposed that, knowing that the Lakers didn't have a first-round pick. That actually is kind of funny to me. But Dennis Schroeder is a name to watch. He was dealt late in the deadline yesterday, and now they're saying Dennis Schroeder could be one of those buyout guys.
Yep.
And if he does hit the buyout market, the Lakers are going to pounce on Schroeder. They didn't want him to leave their team last year, and he would fit in very well with that team again. So that's I think at this point, if the Lakers are going to add through the buyout market, they're hoping that Schroeder hits that so they can bring him back.
Yeah. Eric Bledsoe would be another guy I think that they would have to give a look at if he hits the buyout market as well. Look, if I was the Lakers, I'm not making that deal for one reason only. This season's a wash. There's nothing saving me this year, to be quite honest. If I'm the Lakers, I'm sorry, Freddie, if you ever hear this. It's not me. Okay, I have a twin, and that's who's sitting here right now. All right, so the Lakers were not doing anything. Let's just be quite frank about it. They're not a good basketball team, and bringing in John Wall, sure, it takes Russell Westbrook out of the equation, but now you're going to have someone who may or may not be on the court, and when he's on the court, is he much better than Russell Westbrook? I'm not sure. I can't tell you he's an elevated upgrade. Like, I think Dennis Schroeder would be an upgrade over Russell Westbrook, not because Dennis Schroeder's as great a player, but he fits into this system and he fits into this style a lot better than Russell Westbrook does. John Wall, I don't know where he fits, so I don't think I'd make that trade. Again, the Lakers have to look at a guard in the buyout market. They got to find a point guard who can stretch the floor, shoot the three ball, point guard, shooting guard, whoever. They have to find a guard because the way they're on right now, they have no chance at really doing anything. To be quite frank, there's really no way. So again, Eric Bledsoe, if they could maybe get a Goran Dragic, you could think about that. And then you also mentioned that 3 guys that I think they have to go heavily in on because without those 3, without trying to add those 3, I still don't think it makes them a championship team, but it gets you a little bit closer to being a relative playoff team. You know what I mean? Right now, you're barely a play-in team. You're trying to get into that playoff spot. The Lakers are just in deep trouble, man. All right, so that concludes our talk about the NBA trade deadline. We will be right back in a little bit after a quick break.
Whole sports all plays. Whole sports all plays. Whole sports all plays. 365, we making up plays. You talking the game, get you to the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. Sport all plays, they working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All sports all plays. All sports all plays. Network. We on top of our game. All sports all plays. All sports all plays.
All right, welcome back. Go cop the merch if you haven't. Let's go ahead and talk about the NFL head coaches. I think that's probably the biggest thing that we want to talk about right now. When you look at the NFL head coaching list, they came to a close just a little bit ago, and we can go ahead and talk about a couple of guys in that category. Number 1, Mike McDaniel, the new coach of the Miami Dolphins. Exactly, the Miami Dolphins. Get a new head coach in Mike McDaniel after the whole Brian Flores situation. Yes, that was not pretty, and we will see what comes off of that lawsuit, and there's definitely some stuff that will be said during that whole situation. But they bring in Mike McDaniel. Mike McDaniel might be wondering, who is Mike McDaniel? Oh, Mike McDaniel is the offensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers, or was the offensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers since 2017. He was also on the staff of that Washington team that had Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, Zach Taylor, and add him as the 5th guy on that list. And that team somehow went 3-13. We need the receipts from Jay Gruden because he was probably getting $100,000 to lose those games. There's no way. There's just no way. But he will now be the head coach in Miami. Again, no one really knew who this guy was, right? The only thing I knew of Mike McDaniel was him going, Mike Jones, let's go. That's the only thing I'd ever heard of Mike McDaniel. I literally could not tell you anything else that he had done. Didn't know that he was you just didn't hear him in talks about being the next head coach anywhere. So Dustin, give me your reaction to his hiring, and do you think it's going to work out?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, I changed some things in my mic, so I want to make sure. But I honestly didn't even know who this guy was. I saw the hiring and like, who is this? And then I looked at a picture of him and I'm like, oh, I still don't know who this is, but this is one of your classic banking on the Kyle Shanahan, banking on the Mike Shanahan coaching tree where you hope it's a swing for the fences and it works. But otherwise you're going to go down swinging and it's not going to work out in your favor. he's walking into a very difficult situation, knowing the way that Brian Flores left, knowing all the reports out there of kind of the things that Stephen Ross did to Brian Flores, paying him $100,000 to lose games, basically telling Brian Flores that Tua's our guy and there's nothing you can say differently that's going to make me change our mind. So not only does he walk into a situation where he's got to start Tua, but he's got to walk into the situation and try to win right away. Otherwise, if he struggles, the reports are, is he getting paid $100,000 to lose games because Miami's 0-5? Miami's 1-6. Like, he's in a lose-lose situation right now, and at this point, I think it's going to take him 2 or 3 years kind of to get out of that lose-lose situation. Because he's going from San Francisco to Miami. He doesn't have that offensive weapon in Deebo Samuel sitting in Miami. Their best offensive weapon is Mike Gesicki at this point, with Jalen Waddle as your very close second, but Waddle's only a rookie, and he really hasn't shown much because Tua hasn't shown much as a quarterback. So unless Waddle can come out and look like Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, I really don't know what Miami's going to look like under this guy.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting issue when we talk about Mike McDaniel, because you have no idea what you're going to look like if you are the Miami Dolphins. And like you said, there's really just nothing right now that you say, wow, Miami's a good spot to be at. I think the one guy that isn't being talked about enough with Miami, though, is Jalen Waddle. He had an incredible rookie year that got really overshadowed by Jamar Chase and this whole Miami situation. And the fact that he was able to put like 1,100 yards on the board is pretty incredible given the circumstances of what he had to deal with in Miami. Here's the one thing that I will give to Mike McDaniel. And again, I don't know what portion of the offense was Kyle Shanahan and what portion was Mike McDaniel. I don't know where that line was. Deebo Samuel, though, he does swear by him. He said, I'd hate to see him leave. He's a genius. So just throwing that out there. But who was he the offensive coordinator for? The Niners. When they went to the Super Bowl, they had Jimmy Garoppolo, a limited quarterback who isn't going to throw the game in terms of he's not going to win you a game. He can lose you it, but as long as you keep him as long as you call the right play and keep him protected, he can be productive. The same can be said about Tua, right? He is a guy who hasn't shown a lot, probably a little bit limited, not very athletic, has a bigger arm than Jimmy Garoppolo does, but just, again, has a tendency to make some bad decisions. But just you haven't seen that special kind of thing that you saw at Alabama. The twitch isn't there for him. So now you get a guy who's worked with a limited quarterback before. I'm not saying it's going to work. But to me, the only guys who are going to get a Miami Dolphins hire were going to be guys who they believed in Tua or they said we can make Tua work. Those are only guys getting jobs. If you said, no, I don't think Tua's your guy, you weren't getting a job. Or you had a doubt about Tua, you weren't getting the job. We know that because of Brian Flores fire. So to me, Mike McDaniel is hired because of where he came from and the fact that, again, he knows how to win with a limited quarterback. Where the line is between him and Kyle Shanahan, it's probably in the sand, and it's probably 80-20 Kyle. But I will take the 20% of someone who knows how to win with a limited quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like what you said. How you were saying, like with Waddle. He had that connection with Tua in college because they played together.
Yep.
That's kind of, I think, why he had as good of a season as he did. Same thing with Chase and Burrow. It pains me to say this, but I loved Tua when he was at Alabama.
Yeah, me too.
I'm just not sold on him. I just don't know if he can be an NFL quarterback, and he's a lefty. How many left-handed quarterbacks have there been outside of Steve Young that have had success? Yeah. There really hasn't been one, and for whatever reason, left-handed quarterbacks don't make it in the NFL, and Tua has the talent to do it. I'm not sold on Tua, and I just don't know what it's going to take for Tua to kind of break through and get to that level that everyone expects him to be at.
Yeah. This whole Mike McDaniel thing, again, this whole Miami Dolphins thing with Tua, it's just interesting. I mean, you're saying here, like, okay, what is really going to happen? Because like you said, a lot of us really liked Tua at Alabama, and you saw a guy who had a big arm and could make plays in the pocket and move around a little bit and extend and do different things. And so far in his NFL career, we just haven't seen it. And whether that's because of coaching or player personnel or whatever it is, scheme, whatever the situation may be, we just haven't seen it out of Tua. And we just don't know if Tua's going to get there. I sure hope Tua's going to get there because I was a big Tua guy. But the way it started, it doesn't look like he's ever going to get there. And to your point, left-handed quarterbacks don't work. Receivers talk like Jerry Rice. I remember him talking about how the transition between Joe Montana and Steve Young was very difficult because the lefty spin, right? It spins in a different direction, and it's harder to catch, especially in your entire life. You're used to that way it comes out of the righty's hands. It spins one direction while the lefty spins in the other one. Yeah, it's a difficult thing to adjust to. I'm rooting for Tua. I hope Mike McDaniel works, but again, it's just a slippery slope down there in Miami, and really just it's going to be a rough season no matter how you swing it. Unless you're winning games, it's going to be real rough in Miami.
Yeah.
So there was another head coaching hire that kind of rounded it all out down there in Jacksonville. It was not the Byron Leftwich reunion that I think a lot of us were expecting. It was Doug Peterson, the former head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. After a 1-year break from the NFL, he is now back as a head coach, and he's taken over the Trevor Lawrence-led Jacksonville Jaguars. Dustin, give me your reaction to this hire.
Well, for starters, Jacksonville kind of dropped the ball on this one because Byron Leftwich basically gave them an ultimatum where it was him or Steve Ballke, and apparently they want to stick with Steve Ballke over Byron Leftwich. So kudos to him. He can go back to Tampa Bay for another year and hang out with Bruce Arians in that team. But I actually like this hire a lot more than a lot of people do, just because of a couple of reasons. Doug Peterson was an NFL quarterback for 12 years, sat behind Brett Favre for 6 of those years. He kind of knows what it takes for a quarterback to have success because he learned behind a lot of good quarterbacks. You got to look at when he was in Philadelphia. He had Carson Wentz as a rookie, and then he had Carson Wentz when Carson Wentz played like an MVP up until his injury. So he worked with a young quarterback in Carson Wentz and had Wentz playing at the best he's ever played. Now you're going into a situation where you have a guy in Trevor Lawrence who I think has more talent than Carson Wentz. Not from a leg side of things, but from an arm and just the overall accuracy that he brings to the table. This could be a great hire for Trevor Lawrence on that side of things because you're bringing in a player coach, you're bringing in a quarterback coach that knows how to work with quarterbacks. And Doug Peterson's done this before where he's inherited a young quarterback, got that quarterback playing at an MVP level, and then basically had like a 3 or 4 year run of success up until things went differently.
I completely agree on this one. I was on the boat of the only hesitation I have with Byron Leftwich, it comes from the fact that his name was never thrown around in any kind of conversation until he had Tom Brady. And it's just a scary thing, right? Your first job after being the coordinator for Tom Brady. Let's think about it, right? You talk about Charlie Weiss. Didn't have a lot of success at Notre Dame. We talk about Josh McDaniels in the NFL. Flamed out with the Denver Broncos. The dumpster fire that was the Bill O'Brien Houston Texans. So, again, I'm not saying Byron Leftwich is going to be like that his first go-around. I think he should and will get a head coaching job one day. I just would have liked to see him without Tom Brady for a year and see what he kind of does. Because Tom Brady, if we're being honest, makes up for a lot of mistakes that, a young offensive coordinator could do, or it makes guys look good. Same way Aaron Rodgers does it. Same way Peyton Manning used to do it. Ben Roethlisberger used to. These guys just make some guys just look a little bit better than they are. The Doug Peterson hire, to me, again, it's just the quarterback. He got the best production out of Carson Wentz before the injury. Nick Foles consistently played well under Doug Peterson. And as you said, I think Trevor Lawrence is more talented than Carson Wentz and Nick Foles. Again, Carson might be the better athlete with the legs, but Trevor Lawrence can move around too. It's not like he can. He showed you against Ohio State consistently that he could go and run around and make some plays. We talked about the big Ohio State run in the semifinal. And I think he has a little bit more experience building a team. I know he took over a lot of that Philly team, but he's done it before. He's kind of seen it. And I think for Jacksonville, you went through the whole dumpster fire that was Urban Meyer. I just think you went with a safer option. I think there's less room to miss with Doug Peterson right now than it feels like with Byron Leftwich, because if you kind of strike out with Byron Leftwich, you hired a first-year guy, you're getting rid of your GM. You kind of just have to start everything back up from scratch, and you're wasting another year of Trevor Lawrence. If you hit great, and it's going to be a grand slam. But for Doug Peterson, you got to keep at least some of the foundation you've already had there. I do think that they're going to regret keeping Ballke in the long run, but I like the Doug Peterson hire just like you a lot more than other people.
Yeah. I mean, if Jacksonville was going to do anything other than Leftwich, this is kind of the option you would take. I know a lot of people wanted Brian Flores to end up there or Jim Caldwell, but Peterson's a safe option. You know what you're going to get out of him. You know what his track record is, where typically he has his teams competitive the first year, And then the second and third year is kind of where you start to see like that Doug Peterson system kind of take off. So given that Jacksonville has a lot of money to spend this offseason, I do expect him to be more competitive next year. But then his second year at the helm of Jacksonville, I think when you start to see the Jaguars kind of turn that corner and going to get back to playoff contention.
Yeah, I think you're completely spot on there. Just the track record that he brings, I think, just gives you a little bit more confidence straight away. But we talked about a couple of teams that really just have no shot at the Super Bowl anytime soon. But now we got to talk about the Super Bowl. We talk about the Rams taking on the Cincinnati Bengals in LA. And what a Super Bowl is going to be. You picked the Rams to get to the Super Bowl. I don't remember who your pick originally was, but you picked the Rams to get there. And then the Bengals are here. The surprise really of the season that everyone was like, are they good enough? Are they ready to get here? So I want you to tell me, who do you have winning Super Bowl 56? Is it the young buck and Joe Burrow, or is it a guy that deserves a ring maybe more than anybody else in the NFL and Matthew Stafford?
I had the Rams playing Kansas City, so watching Cincinnati beat Kansas City the way they did, it doesn't necessarily hurt me at all, just because I didn't have a horse really in it, but that wasn't the same Kansas City team that won 10 games in a row at one point. It was that team that was struggling the first 6 weeks of the season where they were trying to do too much and it kind of backfired on them. You got to look at this game in two ways. I think the Rams have the better coach in Sean McVay, but Zach Taylor is Sean McVay's prodigy, who was the offensive coordinator under Sean McVay for a couple of years, so you got that into play. I think the Rams have the more talented team top to bottom. They have more pieces on offense. They have a better defense. They have a better pass rush. And we've seen how skeptical Cincinnati's offensive line can be at times. So I don't know how they plan to stop Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd, and Von Miller. That could be interesting. You have a guy in Joe Burrow that is, I'm not going to put him on Tom Brady's level yet. But if you look at the first 2 years of Tom Brady and compare it to the first 2 years of Joe Burrow, they're very eerily similar, which is kind of a scary thing to think about. Burrow has a chance to be the third quarterback in NFL history to win a Heisman, a national championship, and a Super Bowl, which he would join Joe Montana and Joe Namath. So there's a lot of history in there. Matthew Stafford's trying to basically prove everybody wrong that he wasn't the problem in Detroit, and I think win or lose, he's already shown that he wasn't the problem in Detroit. I just have to go with Cincinnati at this point. It's not because of Joe Burrow. It's not because of anything. It's the one statistic that consistently happens. And that's no team in NFL history has ever won the Super Bowl when their quarterback makes more than 13% of the team's salary cap. Matthew Stafford is at 17%. Joe Burrow's at 3.5% because he's on his rookie deal. And until that stat can be broken, I can't lean off of it even if I want to pick the Rams. Because you look at every year that Tom Brady's won the Super Bowl, he was at 10% or less of his team's salary cap because he took pay cuts. The year that Philadelphia won the Super Bowl, you had Nick Foles at $2.5 million, Carson Wentz on his rookie deal. So all these teams that win the Super Bowl, they do it with a quarterback that's on a rookie contract or a very cheap contract where they use the rest of that money to build around the roster. And Stafford has played well. Stafford deserves everything he's gotten this year, but he's still at that 17% as opposed to Joe Burrow at 2.5%. So I got to go with that stat right now, and I got to ride Joe Burrow on this one until that stat can be broken in the Super Bowl.
Well, what a surprise. Stat guy goes with the stat, huh? I mean, that's a great stat to have. I think this game could be very reminiscent to last year's Super Bowl, where it's just the defensive line from the Rams is just all over Burrow, and it could just be like him being like Mahomes last year, where he's just running around trying to do something. But I said this on the show before the AFC Championship game, right? I said that before the divisional round, I said, I'm just going to pick them, right? I picked them to beat Tennessee, and I picked them to beat Kansas City. And again, I was like that uncanny ability to just adjust when they did it against Tennessee, when they did it against Cincinnati. For a young team, it's really interesting because you don't see that from a young team. You kind of see we're playing the same way. Like when Kansas City was in 2019, went to the AFC Championship game, they didn't adjust. They played, we're throwing the ball down the field and we don't play defense. Same kind of deal in 2020 almost, whereas we're throwing the ball down the field and we don't play deep. You don't really see that kind of young team adjust in this way. So this game could be very reminiscent to last year's Super Bowl. I don't think it will be. I think it could be reminiscent to a Super Bowl that was played 20 years ago. Super Bowl 36. You got the high-flying offense of a team that no one really had the answer for before the season started. A lot of people picked them to win. And no, this isn't the greatest show on turf. I get it. But it's still the Rams against a second-year quarterback, a second-year head coach. And we all talk about Joe Burrow. We say it's eerily similar to Tom Brady. Could you imagine if Cincinnati wins the Super Bowl and it's kind of the same story and it's 20 years after that first Super Bowl for Tom Brady, the year Tom Brady retires? I think that story is so great. And I've liked Cincinnati since the midway point of this year, and I'm just going to keep riding it. I'm just going to keep going with it. I got Cincinnati winning. Honestly, if I'm using my brain, I would pick the Rams because that defensive line is just so good. But just something about the Cincinnati team, it just feels like they're just going to find a way in the end. I just feel they're just going to find that way. I got Cincinnati to win the Super Bowl. I'm with you on this one.
Yeah, and with Cincinnati, too, Burrow got sacked 9 times by Tennessee. Yeah. And yet he still won that game. Then you had pass rush in Kansas City, who only sacked him once. And Kansas City's pass rush has been much better in the second half of the season.
Yeah.
I don't expect the Rams to come away with 1 sack. I think they could end up with 5, 6, maybe 7, just because there's nobody on the offensive line that's going to be able to stop Darnold and Floyd consistently. But Burrow's taken the most sacks of anybody this year. He's been knocked down, he gets right back up, and he does what he does, and ultimately, Cincinnati is a second-half team. We've seen We've seen it throughout the entire playoffs where they don't play great in the first half. They just keep themselves within striking distance, and then in the second half, they play completely different. You can say the exact opposite about the Rams, who have looked amazing in the first half of games, but have not played well in the second half. I mean, they played well down the stretch against San Francisco because they had to. But outside of that, they're not really a second-half team. That's why I think if Cincinnati can keep everything within a 2 scores, like 10 points or less, if they can keep themselves close, I think they win just because it's a position that they're comfortable. And they're used to playing from behind, making those adjustments, and then being that second-half team.
And that was something that I've been talking about it, and I was like, it just kind of feels like it matches up really well because the Rams, again, they get off to great first-half starts. And then something about the second half scares them. You know, they're like a kid walking through a haunted house. They're just worried about the second half. And Cincinnati, they love the second half. Again, as long as they keep it close in that first, which I think they can, it's going to be Cincinnati's ball game. Like, again, we just talk about how every single game this playoffs, you say that second half, and you're like, man, the Rams did not look good. Like, that second half, like, you talk about the Bucs, did not look good. San Francisco, Matthew Stafford threw the game-ending interception, or at least a game-changing interception. Right. And it was dropped. Like, they don't look as good in the second half of things. And again, that's the exact opposite about Cincinnati. Against Kansas City, me and you were texting and we were like, how can Cincinnati win this game? And I picked Cincinnati. I was like, this feels like a wash here. And then the second half rolls around and Joe Burrow's just doing Joe Burrow things. The Cincinnati Bengals adjust and make Patrick Mahomes forget how to play football. And it's a whole other ball game. This second half stuff is crazy. And I definitely think it plays a big impact in this Super Bowl.
Yeah. And like the play that changed the game against Kansas City was the end of the first half, and the Chiefs did not get a touchdown when they should have just taken a field goal and went in by 14 as opposed to 11. And we've seen Matthew Stafford make terrible throws that have resulted in interceptions, and we've seen him make terrible throws at the drop. And I kind of can see that happening again where the Rams might be up by 10. They're going down to try to score again at the end of the first half, and something happens, whether it's a Stafford interception, whether it's a fumble, and then you can just kind of see, like, Cincinnati has all the momentum, and the Rams are just, like, walking away, like, what could have been if we would have scored a touchdown here? What could have been if we got a field goal out of this and been up by 2 scores as opposed to basically, still 2 scores, but 2 touchdowns basically as opposed to 10 points.
Yeah, it's going to be a crazy game, an exciting Super Bowl. And again, whoever wins, I'm gonna be happy either way because if Joe Burrow wins, I'm gonna be so excited for Joe, and if Matthew Stafford wins, I'm saying finally this guy gets a ring for everything he had to suffer in Detroit. So I'm good for either guy in this one. I do want to pivot. Just the last thing we're gonna do, the Olympics. I just want to ask you, what's your favorite thing that's happened from these Winter Olympic Games so far?
I honestly can say I haven't watched much of it because I hate the way the Olympics are done now. Because obviously being in China, they're 12 hours ahead of us. So if you're going to watch it live, it's going to be thinking 10 o'clock at night where I live, so I'm not going to be able to see much of it. And unlike Olympics in the past, you don't have all these networks that replay stuff. It's literally like 2 channels, maybe 3 channels that replay what happened when you were sleeping. But when you go to the channel guide, it says curling, speed skating, figure skating. It gives you 3 different things, and you don't know which one you're going to see until you turn on the channel and see that it's figure skating. So it doesn't have the same coverage that it used to have. And the one sport that I always watched in the Winter Olympics was hockey. Well, look what the NHL did with hockey this year. They basically said the Americans can't play. So you have a bunch of 17 and 18-year-old juniors filling out the American team that are going to get the crap kicked out of them because Canada can have all their players play. Russia, all these other NHL, or all these other countries have all their ace-caliber hockey players out there. So the Americans are going to go out there and just look like they don't belong just because the NHL said, well, we're not going to let you play because of COVID and all this other good stuff. I still enjoy the downhill skiing. I watched the men's competition where I think 3 or 4 skiers fell in like the same exact part of the course because it was a blind turn that nobody could figure out. Don't go high in that turn, go the other side. And then obviously bobsledding and skeleton and those things I still watch, but just the whole coverage thing, and now with Olympics, it's not done as well as it should be. And I talked about this on the morning show, I think it was Wednesday when Jay was on. You always hear the year before the Olympics, you always hear about the World Cup. Like, you have the skiing World Cup, you have the track and field World Cup, and you have, like, all these things that the Olympic athletes have to do just to qualify for the Olympics. I'm at the point now where, instead of showing the Olympics every 4 years, why don't we get more coverage on these World Cups? Why don't we get more coverage of what these Olympic athletes have to do just to make the Olympics? Like, when Usain Bolt was getting all these gold medals, nobody knew all stuff that he had to do just to get to the Olympics. He had to win like all these races just to get to where he got. We need to figure out how we can get coverage of that stuff so people are actually excited again to watch the Olympics because they can maybe follow a guy like Usain Bolt and follow him for 3 years and watch what he does just to get to the Olympics. So then when the Olympics start, they have somebody to follow. They understood like how these athletes got there and what they actually have to do just to get to the Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, the way it's set up is really weird. You don't really get to see a lot of it. And to me, it doesn't really hold, for some reason, the same kind of weight the Summer Olympics do. But there are a couple moments that I really did enjoy from this Winter Olympics so far. Chloe Kim defending her gold on the women's halfpipe. I love that because, well, number one, I remember when she was 17 and she won the gold medal. My dad kind of looked at me and, you know, like, he's like, you're 15, 16 years old, man. Like, what are you doing? She's out here competing in the Olympics, winning gold, and you're 15, 16-year-old just sitting on the couch watching her. And I was like, man, what you gonna do? Shaun White finishing his career. It kind of feels like this year is the like end of an era kind of year. You had like Ben Roethlisberger, Tom Brady retiring, Shaun White kind of going off, and it kind of feels like the end of an era. But speaking of the men's snowboarding halfpipe, Ayumu Hirano, I don't know how to say the name, but man, his final run was unbelievable. He scored a 96. And when I'm talking, like, I watched the women's halfpipe, the whole thing. I watched a lot of the men's thing. This run was just different. It was just unbelievable. It's like, I'm sitting here, holy crap. So that run was probably one of my favorites. And then Nathan Chen of the U.S. winning gold in the figure skating. And I mean, just the domination which he had in the final bit. In his final free skate, he needed a 196 and to get gold. And he got a 218 to his. He did a routine at Elton John's Rocket Man, so I was kind of vibing out to Rocket Man. And I guess by the end, he was as high as a kite, you know. So it was pretty darn cool, those things. But I'm completely in your boat. We need to see a lot more of these Olympic Games because you don't see a lot of the work that they had to do. Pride over here saying he had to win pre-qualifiers. Yeah, and we don't really see, or even like the World Championships. I've never seen a World Championship for any of these events. Like they talk about swimming World Championships. I've never seen one of those. I know Michael Phelps has maybe won a couple. I have no idea what he's done to even get to the Olympics. I just figured, okay, you're in the Olympics, right? So there is something that needs to be done. And they do need to show a lot more of these replays because it's one guy doing it, really one channel, 2 channels showing everything that goes on. It's just kind of, it's kind of frustrating what happens with the Olympic coverage.
Yeah. And I mean, especially if you don't have cable, you get NBC. You don't get USA and you don't get all these other side channels that show it. And if the Olympics is such like a world game type of thing, you would think you'd want it on all the non-cable networks like ABC, NBC, CBS, like anything that people can watch just so the coverage is there.
Well, we do appreciate you guys for tuning in on this Friday afternoon here. We're just about out of time. Thank you so much. We got a great weekend ahead of us. Dustin, you got any last words for the people?
Nope, just enjoy Super Bowl Sunday. For your significant others out there, I know Valentine's Day is Monday, so please forgive your significant others if they're hungover Monday morning from drinking a little bit too much on Sunday. This is why the day after the Super Bowl needs to be a national holiday, not because I'm a football fan and I watch the Super Bowl, but how many people actually care to go back to work on Monday morning hungover from the Super Bowl? It's just a day that's not very productive.
Yeah, and on that note, my sister's, she's in Wake County Public Schools, and they do not have school on Monday. And I don't know why they scheduled a teacher workday that particular day. It's not even teacher workday. I don't think there's anything going on that day. And I'm sitting here, is it just the day after the Super Bowl? They said, I'm like, that's a great start, because that's what we all need. I think we would all love to not have to do anything the Monday after the Super Bowl. Well, we appreciate you guys for joining us here on ASAP Recap. Join us next Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Central, and we will see you right back here next week.
All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. 365, we're making up plays. We're talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety, topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, like working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All sports, all plays.